In another moment it was made clear to him. The door swung open, and the white robed figure of Mélisse sprang toward him with a cry that echoed through the dungeon chambers. What happened then, the passing of white faces beyond the doorway, the subdued murmur of voices, were all lost to Howland in the knowledge that at the last moment they had let her come to him, that he held her in his arms, and that she was crushing her face to his breast and sobbing things to him which he could not understand. Once or twice in his life he had wondered if realities might not be dreams, and the thought came to him now when he felt the warmth of her hands, her face, her hair, and then the passionate pressure of her lips on his own. He lifted his eyes, and in the doorway he saw Jean Croisset, and behind him a wild, bearded face, the face that had been over him when life was almost choked from him on the Great North Trail. And beyond these two he saw still others, shining ghostly and indistinct in the deeper gloom of the outer darkness. He strained Mélisse to him, and when he looked down into her face he saw her beautiful eyes flooded with tears, and yet shining with a great joy. Her lips trembled as she struggled to speak. Then suddenly she broke from his arms and ran to the door, and Jean Croisset came between them, with the wild bearded man still staring over his shoulder. "Monsieur, will you come with us?" said Jean. The bearded man dropped back into the thick gloom, and without speaking Howland followed Croisset, his eyes on the shadowy form of Mélisse. The ghostly faces turned from the light, and the tread of their retreating feet marked the passage through the blackness. Jean fell back beside Howland, the huge bulk of the bearded man 3 paces ahead. A dozen steps more, and they came to a stair down which a light shone. The Frenchman's hand fell detainingly on Howland's arm, and when a moment later they reached the top of the stairs all had disappeared but Jean and the bearded man. Dawn was breaking, and a pale light fell through the 2 windows of the room they had entered. On a table burned a lamp, and near the table were several chairs. To one of these Croisset motioned the engineer, and as Howland sat down the bearded man turned slowly and passed through a door. Jean shrugged his shoulders as the other disappeared. "Mon Dieu, that means that he leaves it all to me," he exclaimed. "I don't wonder that it is hard for him to talk, monsieur. Perhaps you have begun to understand?" "Yes, a little," replied Howland. His heart was throbbing as if he had just finished climbing a long hill. "That was the man who tried to kill me. But Mélisse, the " He could go no further. Scarce breathing, he waited for Jean to speak. "It is Pierre Thoreau," he said, "eldest brother to Mélisse. It is he who should say what I am about to tell you, monsieur. But he is too full of grief to speak. You wonder at that? And yet I tell you that a man with a better soul than Pierre Thoreau never lived, though 3 times he has tried to kill you. Do you remember what you asked me a short time ago, monsieur? If I thought that you were the John Howland who murdered the father of Mélisse 16 years ago? God's saints, and I did until hardly more than half an hour ago, when some one came from the south and exploded a mine under our feet. It was the youngest of the 3 brothers. Monsieur, we have made a great mistake, and we ask your forgiveness." In the silence the eyes of the 2 men met across the table. To Howland it was not the thought that his life was saved that came with the greatest force, but the thought of Mélisse, the knowledge that in that hour when all seemed to be lost she was nearer to him than ever. He leaned half over the table, his hands clenched, his eyes blazing. Jean did not understand, for he went on quickly. I know it is hard, M'sieur. Perhaps it will be impossible for you to forgive a thing like this. We have tried to kill you by a slow torture, as we thought you deserved. But think for a moment, M'sieur, of what happened up here 16 years ago this winter. I have told you how I choked life from the man fiend. So I would have choked life from you if it had not been for Melisse. I, too, am guilty. Only 6 years ago we knew that the right John Howland, the son of the man I slew, was in Montreal, and we sent to seek him this youngest brother, for he had been a long time at school with Melisse and knew the ways of the South better than the others. But he failed to find him at that time, and it was only a short while ago that this brother located you. As our Blessed Lady is my witness, M'sieur, it is not strange that he should have taken you for the man we sought, for it is singular that you bear him out like a brother in looks, as I remember the boy. It is true that Francois made a great error when he sent word to his brothers suggesting that if either Gregson or Thorne was put out of the way you would probably be sent into the North. I swear by the Virgin that Mélisse knew nothing of this, M'sieur. She knew nothing of the schemes by which her brothers drove Gregson and Thorne back into the South. They did not wish to kill them, and yet it was necessary to do something that you might replace one of them, M'sieur. They did not make a move alone but that something happened. Gregson lost a finger. Thorne was badly hurt, as you know. Bullets came through their window at night. With Jackpine in their employ it was easy to work on them, and it was not long before they sent down asking for another man to replace them. For the first time a surge of anger swept through Howland. "The cowards!" he exclaimed. "A pretty pair, Croisset, to crawl out from under a trap to let another in at the top." "Perhaps not so bad as that," said Jean. "They were given to understand that they, and they alone, were not wanted in the country. It may be that they did not think harm would come to you, and so kept quiet about what had happened. It may be, too, that they did not like to have it known that they were running away from danger. Is not that human, M'sieur? Anyway, you were detailed to come, and not until then did Mélisse know of all that had occurred." The Frenchman stopped for a moment. The glare had faded from Howland's eyes. The tense lines in his face relaxed. I believe I understand everything now, Jean," he said. "You traced the wrong John Howland, that's all. I love Mélisse, Jean. I would kill John Howland for her. I want to meet her brothers and shake their hands. I don't blame them. They're men. But somehow it hurts to think of her, of Mélisse, as almost a murderer." "Mon Dieu, Monsieur, has she not saved your life? Listen to this. It was then, when she knew what had happened, that Mélisse came to me, whom she had made the happiest man in the world because it was she who brought my Mariane over from Churchill on a visit, especially that I might see her and fall in love with her, Monsieur, which I did. Mélisse came to me, to Jean Croisset, and instead of planning your murder, Monsieur, she schemed to save your life with me, who would have cut you into bits no larger than my finger and fed you to the carrion ravens, who would have choked the life out of you until your eyes bulged in death, as I choked that one up in the Great Slave. Do you understand, Monsieur? It was Mélisse who came and pleaded with me to save your life, before you had left Chicago, before she had heard more of you than your name, before—" Croisset hesitated and stopped. "Before what, Jean?" "Before she had learned to love you, Monsieur." "God bless her!" exclaimed Howland.